All right. Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me once again is Zack Henderson, whom you might know as Zack Henderson. I don't think he's got a nickname, come to think of it. We should maybe fix that. Uh, we hadn't really considered this, you know. In fact, I only now am I thinking about this. This is a little bit of a little too late to think about it, I suppose.
Yeah, man, it's funny you mentioned that. In the early days of social media and Instagram, I threw a couple ideas around of, like screen names,
Yeah.
nicknames, business names. Um, but somebody told me, I don't know, maybe if I read it somewhere, just that like your name is like if you can own your name, that'll go pretty far. And
Totally.
honestly, like the first thing I did on the internet before I got like on social media or anything is I got ZackHenderson.com, the domain. So I never really had to get creative with my name in any other capacity. So I kind of lucked out.
Did you also buy Zach, Z-A-C-H, Henderson.com?
That was taken.
Damn. Okay. Well, okay, but it was taken before you, so it's not like you just sat on your hands and missed it.
Yeah, yeah. And as far as I know, I think the last time I checked, maybe about a year ago, it was still taken.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's okay. I mean, probably somebody's using it. I always think about these things because given that my name is spelled funny, you know, like the first
right.
thing that comes to mind for me is everyone just misspells my name. And there have been times actually where it's like I'll spell my name out for people and they still misspell it like right in front of me. It's just like the nervous system is just going on autopilot. They're like, yeah, Alex,
Yeah.
KS, and then boom, X, you know, they're just cutting corners. So I have alexsalkin.com with an X as well, just to make sure that, you know, it gets routed toward my website. Um,
Smart.
yeah. I think it's essential. But no, I agree. I think if you own your name, that's huge. If you're known by your name too, that's another big thing. And thankfully, mine's a little bit of both. You know, the Hebrew Hammer is like sort of the tongue-in-cheek nickname, but people actually, if they know it, they still also know my name. They're not like, I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on exact names, but there are people out there who like go by nicknames, and people don't really know. Actually, I mean, you know, Pavel goes mononymously as just Pavel, and so not as many. I mean, obviously, the people who are very close in the strong first world, they know his last name is Tsatsulin, but people
Right.
mispronounce it in all manner of different ways and what have you. So, uh, and I suppose his last name is spelled funny too. Anyway, these are things I think about with somebody as somebody with a funny spelled name. These are
For
important.
sure. Well, all that to say, if anybody out there has a cool name for me, lay it on me. I've heard just about everything. But if something strikes the right tone, I'm willing to to give it a shot. But yeah, I mean it is funny, especially in the Instagram era. There's been, a bunch of people. Like actually, here's a good example. Belfast came to
Mm,
Nashville a couple weeks ago,
yeah,
and so, I obviously couldn't pass up the opportunity to go and hang out when it was just right in my backyard. And
right.
so um, saw, a lot of folks from, who I've known kind of off and on for years. Dave Whitley being one,
Yep.
who's another a good example of someone who has a real name and a stage name,
Yeah.
Iron Tamer, right? So he's actually someone who's a good example of that. Um, but kind of met a lot of Instagram friends, quote unquote, in real life for the first time, and it's crazy because a lot of these folks, I guess for lack of a better term, are
Shorter than you think?
well, I'm not one to talk, so
No, but I'm just
uh,
saying, like, you know, people have these
oh,
larger than life personalities, and you meet them, you're like, oh, you're just a regular sized person. You're not like 8'9", you know?
Oh, of course. And it's not hard to look huge when you're looking, at a little box in a little box
Yeah.
on a screen and with angles and everything.
Exactly.
But
The angle's always slightly up, you know?
oh, of course. Of course, people know what they're doing.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, it's like, man, I've seen your screen name, which is some, maybe tongue-in-cheek play on your real name
Yeah.
or, whatever. And so it's like, oh, I know you as XYZ Kettlebell. I know
Yeah.
you as Jacked 1995. And
Yeah.
it's like, please remind me of your real name.
Yeah.
And so that's just the world we live in 2025, I guess.
That's so true. That's happened to me on a couple of occasions. I'm like, aren't you so and so? You know, and it's clearly not their given name. And they're like, yeah, that's me. And then I look for their real name, and again, it's like, it's usually something unremarkable, but yeah, they're known by the screen name very easily, and they're shorter than you would think. That's again a
Often the case.
yes. I've been accused of that before. Actually, I went to Australia to teach a body weight mastery workshop, and one of the attendees was like, "You're shorter than I thought you would be," and I was like, I feel pretty normal sized, you know, but I'm glad that I give off the larger than life vibes, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get that all the time. My driver's license says 5'7", so maybe when I have extra good posture, I could
Yeah.
maybe pass for 5'8". So all that to say, I'm not one to talk.
Right.
But yeah, I'm tactical size. That's what I like to call
Bingo.
it. I'm
Yeah, I love it.
tactical.
I like the rebranding, you know, the tactical size. I first heard Mark Rifkind say that, and he's definitely tactical size. And I don't think he invented it, but I remember hearing him say it many years ago, and I was like, that's a pretty good way of saying it, you know. It's
Well, I'm
universal.
definitely sure I stole it from him. If that's the case, then yeah.
Could be. I'm sure that he took it from like special operators who are known to typically be on the shorter side. You know, you don't see a lot of Michael Jordans out there, you know, like commando crawling through the dirt to, you know, get to some sort of military target. I don't know. They're usually short dudes.
Right. No, exactly.
Well, you know, speaking of workshop, as I spoke of earlier, you've got another. Was this the third year in a row you're doing Lift-A-Palooza, or is this even more? I know it's been at least three, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I think this will be, I believe this will be the fourth one in a row and the seventh one ever.
Overall.
So yeah, we did a few pre-COVID, and then
Oh,
obviously that threw us for a loop for about 2.5 years.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we kind of it's funny. Um, if anybody out there has like tried to put on an event, the first big obstacle is the date.
Yeah.
When do you actually do it? And so I really racked my brain on like, okay, you know, holiday season completely out. Most of summer, nobody wants to do anything except go to the beach. So it's kind of
Yeah.
like most of summer is out. Fall can be a little bit tricky because that's like when, you know, that's actually like a really popular like seminar, workshop, cert season. And so a lot of times people are booked out, through the fall. So all that to say, when we kind of came back over COVID, we decided the last weekend in January,
Yeah.
period. Put it on your calendar whenever you want to show up, bank on it being the last weekend in January, because that's kind of the sweet spot of where the least number of things are going on. So all that to say, if anybody's interested, uh, ideally in any point in the future, hopefully you can still bank on it being the last week of January.
It makes sense too because it's like there's no more holiday travels. People are still just kind of recovering in some sense from the holiday season and gearing up for the new year. I think there's not too much tourism going on almost anywhere. So it's like the ideal thing to do is find a time when people have as few excuses not to go because it is difficult to fill an event. You know, I haven't done it personally, but I've been involved in the sense that, you know, I was either a primary presenter or one of them, and there are just there are more logistics to getting somebody to show up for an event. But I think live events are going to start really roaring back pretty soon because I think with the combination of, well, even though this year will mark I guess 5 years since, the whole COVID fiasco, where everything was like online and everything was, very hands off. Um, People still remember that. And I also think the fact that there was this, it seems like quantum leap in just doing everything online. Because, I mean, we're talking via Zoom right now. Zoom became like, I mean, if there's any COVID conspiracy that people want to believe, it should be that Zoom caused it so that they could just absolutely dominate the video call market because that's clearly what happened, you know.
For sure. For
Yeah, like
sure.
I'm sure you've seen The Big Lebowski. Look at who benefits, man, and he's trying to explain any case. Um, but yeah, I think people want more live events because number one, there was this like I think people still have this fatigue of doing everything online. But the other thing I heard this, I thought this was very interesting, oddly enough, or maybe not oddly enough, it was at a live event. It was a seminar on AI put together by a very well-known marketer, and he said the exact same thing. And this guy knows digital and online marketing like the back of his hand, but he said people are going to want like the increase in AI is going to cause people to want more human connection because they're going to start distrusting what they see even more. And I mean, if you've seen the recent AI video boom and how it just keeps developing, it's getting really hard to tell what's real and what's fake. People want that real connection. And I think, people are still going to use the internet. They're still going to obviously find great training information online, of which you have quite a bit. But I bet anything that Lift-A-Palooza in the coming years is going to end up continuing to be bigger and bigger because people are really going to want that in-person experience. And, is this going to be a 2-day event like it was last year, or is this a 1-day event?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So the the promise has kind of always been facilitating a unique hands-on training experience.
Hmm.
And kind of like from the get-go, in my mind, I always kind of wanted that to be a unique mix of coaches.
Yeah.
And so I think our first couple years it was just like one day, and then we were just blessed to have you know bigger and not necessarily better because everybody has their own unique value to bring, but kind of like bigger and bigger draws in terms of like coaches. And so I just kind of took advantage of the opportunity of like what type of event would I want to go to.
Yeah.
And I really like nerding out. I really like the deep dives. I don't like going like 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there, you know, that kind of thing. Like let's let's focus on quality over quantity. And
Yeah.
so when I was thinking like, okay, well if we're bringing in, two or three guest coaches, we have to expand this into a full weekend experience. And so for the past few years, basically what we've got is like a pre-party on Friday, and so that's where things are like kicking off. We're doing like an open gym. We might have we might have a little special guest presentation, but otherwise it's just kind of like a meet and greet. We do dinner, we do an open gym workout, and then kind of the general schedule is typically like all day Saturday. We're doing kettlebells.
Nice.
And all day Sunday, we're doing powerlifting and usually some sort of like kind of special cherry on top, so to
Yeah.
speak. So yeah, so all that to say, yeah, this year our special guest coaches, I'm still pinching myself that that we're bringing in who we're bringing in, but on Saturday we're going to have a full day seminar with Brett Jones. And so he's going to be teaching primarily from his iron cardio and mind the gap
Mm.
courses. So if anybody's not familiar, that's going to be a lot of kettlebell stuff. That's going to be cleans, presses, probably swings, probably snatches, but kind of all in the context of this, if you want to get really nerdy, this anti-glycolytic style of training, which is basically just to say like strength training, kind of work capacity in a strength training context where like you're not getting gassed,
Hmm.
right? So if anybody's like familiar with Strong First or probably any of our material, they're probably familiar with that basic training methodology. So really getting that instruction practically like from the source is very, very special. So in addition to the kettlebell technique, kettlebell lifting, Brett's also going to be teaching a lot of material out of his Mind the Gap course, which is where we kind of blend strength with mobility,
Hmm.
mobility with stability, all of these things under the umbrella of movement quality.
Hmm.
And so, for anybody who's familiar with Brett's work and collaborations with the FMS, functional movement screen, and the whole Gray Cook assessment and mobility and movement methodology, you're going to be getting a lot of good stuff there. So that's all day Saturday. And then all day Sunday, we've got Jen Thompson teaching powerlifting. And Jen Thompson is like one of the most winningest powerlifting competitors of all time.
Wow.
She's been dominating the powerlifting platform like on a world stage. I think since she's in like her 20s or early 30s, and she's in her 50s now. And yeah, there's really no one better to like learn these things from than these folks who are bringing in. So that's always been the promise is like a unique like a unique experience, like bringing different coaches together that you might not otherwise have the opportunity to learn from in one event. And really making sure that the quality of those coaches and the material and the curriculum are as high as possible. And so that's what we have in store
That's
here in a
incredible.
couple months.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. And this is at the end of January, you said.
Yep, yep. So this will be January 30th, and then that Sunday is February 1st. So it is the very, very last couple days in January.
Very cool. Now, do the
Yep.
coaches tend to attend each other's seminars, or do they often, like, as participants, or like, how does it work exactly? Having shamefully not been to a Lift-A-Palooza myself, I don't know, but I've wondered this on a number of different occasions.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It it really depends. It's kind of gone both ways. Some years, just with the nature of people's schedules, they're literally like in the night before and they're
Yeah.
out that next evening.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that does tend to happen a bunch. But then we've gotten some really cool collaborations, and I mean, the one that really sticks out in my mind is last year we had Dan John and Ed Cohn
Oh, yeah.
come teach. And, these are two like, absolute titans, godfathers of like,
Godfathers of
the gold
Gains.
of gains, if you will. Thank you
Yeah,
for finishing my sentence for me.
you got it.
Um, and so funny enough, like they had never crossed paths
Wow.
before. And so when I told Dan John that Ed Cohn was coming to the thing, he kind of looked at me and he goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "So you want to stick around?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, I'll stick around for Sunday."
Yeah.
So yeah, so it'll probably be one of my highlights of my career that I facilitated an event where those two guys got together, and so they met over dinner on Saturday night, and dude, it was probably exactly what you would imagine. It's just two old dudes sitting at the table, just like trading stories, eh, you know, what happened here? Do you know about this guy? Do you know about that guy? How did you do this? What about that? Just going back and forth, and it was a really cool thing to see. And of course, they're both just super awesome, friendly,
Yeah.
down to earth, salt of the earth guys. Um, and yeah, so having them, under the same roof was really cool. And then yeah, Dan stayed for Ed's powerlifting seminar, and he just, he kind of stood in the corner and just you know, kind of nodded his head and was
Yeah.
just, and then there's one thing, you shake your head when you agree, and then you shake your head like this, where you're like, man, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah, exactly. You can tell. It's funny. You can't necessarily read people's thoughts, but you can hear what they're thinking by just looking at the moving of their head. And that's exactly right. When they're shaking their head like, of course. Why didn't I think of it? Or they're like, yes, I've absolutely experienced that. Yeah, it's like there's
Right.
not too much in between. It's like they're getting, mushed into one or two categories. It's no, it's pretty incredible. I have to say too, I think um, having had the good fortune of being able to hang out with Dan on a couple of occasions, I'm always just like, I view him obviously, I mean, the way that we all do is, like a luminary in the strength training world, but not just that, but like a scholar, you know, like he's the kind of guy who, like, he not only knows the information, but he knows the background. He knows about other stuff that that's like, let's say, tangential to the information itself. Like, for instance, even though he's not known as like an endurance specialist, he knows a lot about endurance training, cardiovascular fitness, all sorts of other stuff like this. Ed Cohn, I think, is very much the same way. I mean, I'm not having met Cohn personally, I couldn't say for sure, but that's the impression I get. Whereas he's like a real scholar of the art of powerlifting and just strength training in general. And he's just like, yeah, that had to have been would have been amazing to be a fly on the wall, or to have at least asked, "Hey, do you mind if I put a tape recorder, in between you guys so that we can listen to this later on?"
Yeah. Yeah, it was super cool. And I mean, it's funny, like speaking of like being a scholar, and not to go too far down, like, the whole internet, social media is, rotting our brains
Yeah,
rabbit hole. But like, you think about quote unquote back in the day, like really before fitness was cool. These days, like fitness is like a pillar of culture.
yeah,
It's something that just like a lot of people are into. And obviously that's a great thing. But like in the 80s, if you were into lifting, if you were into powerlifting, we're talking about a small niche subset of people. And not it was not necessarily cool. Like even if you were
no,
like the one of the best in the world, it was not really that cool. Like
you were
you weren't getting
weird.
invited to like special part. Yeah, right, exactly. It was kind of bizarre. So all that to say, when you have guys who came up in that environment, proved their mettle, proved their, you know, proved really their value through performance and through coaching and through their, methodology and their writing and their ideas, the value of their ideas. Like that's how you got cachet back in the day. There
Yeah,
was no, there was no like, okay, million followers on Instagram. Okay, so what? Um, so yeah, you kind of had to be a scholar because like, you know, that's that's literally how you got to the top of your game as a
yeah.
competitor, as a coach. Um, and so, I mean, speaking of Ed Cohn, I was just up in Chicago last week, and I stopped into Quad's gym, which is the gym where Ed trained and maybe continues to train
Wow.
from all these decades. He's a Chicago guy, and on the walls, there's actually tons of champion bodybuilders who have trained out of that gym. Um, but there's all these pictures, all these signed photos of all these bodybuilders, all these power lifters, and of course with Ed Cohn, you know, magazine article cutouts, you know, pasted up on the wall. And it's just like, yeah, it kind of just struck me that, back in the day, that's how anybody learned anything.
Yeah.
Magazines, books, and if you were going to be worth the ink, if you were going to be worth the paper, well, you had to actually bring something to the table.
Yeah.
And that's definitely something that's
Missing.
missing
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah,
So,
it's so true. Actually, I was reading, there's a guy I followed for a very long time, Alexander Juan Antonio Cortez, and he writes about all sorts of different topics, but fitness is a very big one of them. But this wasn't specifically fitness related, but it ties right into what you're talking about. He said, back in like the 90s and before, if you met somebody like anybody who was like in movies was like truly legitimately famous because it was so uncommon. Whereas now, because of social media, like it's sort of democratized the process of getting a lot of eyes on you. And so you've got people. It's crazy because sometimes, like being a nerd, really like foreign language learning, and I was at a language exchange a couple weeks ago, and in a hostel in Tel Aviv, and I was at one of the tables, and at the end, I there were some gals from the Spanish table who kind of wandered over, and one of them, who I got her Instagram handle like before the end of the night, didn't even think anything of it. But a few days later, I saw that one of my friends, Gil Revis, who's also been on the show a few times, also followed her. I'm like, well, that's got to be a small world. And then I looked at her follower count. She's got like 56,000 followers. And I was like, I met like a famous person, I like didn't even know it. It was just, again, it's like in this like small little niche. She's very, very well known. And but if you had 56,000 people who knew who you were in like 1995, it's because you were and they actively followed you. You were just like a colossal, like untouchable celebrity that people love. Even if you were D-list, if you had, I don't know, let's say 56,000 people in a fan club, like
oh,
you
sure.
were, and I'm not saying this gal's like nothing, but it is very different nowadays to think of like, if you're like, oh, this famous influencer works out here, you're like, whatever. But if you're like, yeah, there's a guy that like legitimate publications fell all over themselves to write about him and interview him who worked here, you're like, okay, that's like that's big news. So yeah,
Right.
Cohn is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because, again, like, before the internet, we only had so many units of attention. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, you have X number of like actors that you know. You maybe have X number of like authors that you read or magazines that you read.
Yeah. Or at least
You know,
pretend
you
to.
wa- or yeah, right, exactly. You only watch X number of like TV shows. Um, and so like, today with social media and with the internet, those like maybe five major units of attention that you have to give, it's like we still have the same, like the pie
Yeah.
size is still the same, but now it's sliced
That-
into a billion teeny tiny slices.
exactly.
And, again, there's maybe pros and cons to all this, but, to bring it back to the importance of like in-person learning. And again, speaking to the point that, you kind of brought up, like with the AI guy, like there's also there's very powerful value in in building the boundaries,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, hey, for the next 3 days, you're actually not following 100 Instagram influencers.
Yeah.
You're actually listening to one person, two people.
Yeah.
And that, ironically enough, can more often than not moves the needle more in 2 days than following 100 different people for years.
Yeah.
That's been my experience, and that's why even since like the days like before COVID, I was so bullish on like live deep dive events is the move because
Yeah,
it's made the biggest difference for me. It's made the biggest difference for like the people that I learn from, my own clients. And so like we can supplement with all this fun internet stuff. But if you're not getting at least one deep dive in-person experience a year, ideally every few months, then you're really missing out.
I agree. That's the other thing is that I think people are going to walk away from it like, man, that was like more than worth what I paid for it. And nobody's going to be like, I wish I had spent the weekend on my couch eating a pint of Haagen-Dazs and flipping mindlessly through social media. Um, I think that in addition to the fact that people more and more are really craving that human interaction, I think the other thing is they're going to feel like they get a sense of meaning out of having spent the time to go deep on a skill, which I think helps people more get in touch with what it means to be human anyway. It's like, we strive, like, Maxwell Maltz, who is author of Psycho-Cybernetics, I think probably the best book ever. I still hate the title because it sounds like a Scientology book, and it's not. It's like very legitimate deep dive into the self-image and how we can harness that to improve our lives. Um, but he says man is a goal striving organism. So it's like if you have a goal, you have something you're focused on, something you're trying to get better at, it automatically gives you like this sense of meaning. And I think, we really can't downplay the importance of fitness because, like you said, now like in our culture, being fit and lifting weights, it's seen as like a normal thing, even if not everybody, or even if most people don't do it, it's still seen as like a normal activity for people to engage in and something to aspire to. And so not only do you not have to feel like you're just some I don't know, like outcast and doing some sort of weird activity and scrounging for information. Like you've gotten the best education you could in just a short amount of time, and you've been given months or maybe even years worth of stuff to work on and dig deeper on and get better at. So yeah, I think Lift-A-Palooza for anybody who is in the Nashville area or has the ability to drive to an airport and just go on an airplane and fly to Nashville, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, everybody, should definitely go. Now, as of the time of this recording, my understanding is that the tickets are almost sold out. And I don't know if you have an estimate on hand how many there are, but I know you said you've only got like a handful left at the moment.
Yeah, so at the time, it's actually funny. Um, we had a couple more people buy tickets over the weekend, so we actually have two spots left.
Damn,
I know that sounds like the most like
made
marketing
up
thing
marketing thing.
ever.
Yeah.
We have two spots left, but the truth is that another big promise of the event is that this isn't going to be like a summit
Yeah.
where like you sit in the back
It's hands on.
and you just listen to presentations.
Yeah.
That's not what this is. This is like a hands-on I'm not going to say small group, but I would say like medium-sized group
Yeah.
experience. And so like the promise is that you're gonna get face-to-face time. You're gonna have the opportunity to make friends, build a strong network. Like we've got probably close to half of the attendees are previous attendees. And so
Nice.
like, people make these really special connections and friends. And, again, it's a great opportunity to build your network. And so we can't, as you know, it's a whole nother can of worms to like put this whole thing like in a big banquet hall and fill it
Yeah.
up with like 200 folks. That's not what this is. So
Yeah.
we're purposefully keeping it pretty small, and when we hit that limit, that's it.
Yeah. Well, where can people go to get information and hopefully be the proud owners of at least one, if not both, of the last two tickets?
Yeah. So I would say the best place to go is ZackHenderson.com. Zack
Yes.
Henderson.com. You don't, there's no funny names. There's no wild screen names. There's no nicknames. ZackHenderson.com and you'll see it.
Nice. Well, Zach, thank you very much for coming on the show. ZackHenderson.com. Where can people follow you online?
Probably the best place is YouTube. That's probably where I'm most I would say that's where I'm most active, and that's like where my best stuff is.
Yeah.
So if you want to learn, if you want to like see what, my training is all about, head on over to YouTube, and that's where you'll also find links to all my stuff. And you can just search my name.
Nice. Very cool. Well, thank you again
Yeah.
for coming on the show. It's been great having you on again.
Dude, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, you want to talk about someone who I've personally learned a ton from, dude, it's you. So I take a lot of pages out of your book in terms of just like, at least trying to be consistent with my writing and my videos. And yeah, man, you're a great leader in the space. And so I appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you any old time.
The pleasure's all mine, and mighty chuffed, as they say in England, for all those kind compliments of yours.
Of
So
course.
we are gonna end here because otherwise you and I could just keep talking for hours and on end. And by that point, the tickets would definitely be sold and people would be disappointed. So we're gonna give them a chance to go race and grab them. Thank you guys very much for tuning in, and as always, have fun and happy training.